Hello Internet, and welcome to a new tutorial. In the vast world of synthesizers, there are, in my opinion, two types of synthesizers. There are these all-around, I can do it all kind of synthesizers like Serum, Vital Pigments, the Virus. These synthesizers are capable of creating a track from 0 to 100 or from A to Z with ease, and the track will rock. And on the other hand, there's this second type of synthesizers, which is the complete opposite. They are really limited, and they can do a few things, but they do these things better than any other synthesizer. And this is what makes them actually what they are. This is what makes them so special. And today I want to talk to you about one of these second category synthesizers and show you why and how awesome it is and what it can deliver for me as an added value as a Psytrance producer. So yeah, with that said, before we dive into this tutorial, if you like the content of this channel and you're new to the channel, you can consider subscribing. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can consider becoming a Patreon or buy my presets, or just leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Things like that helps the channel a lot. Now, with that said, let's dive into this tutorial. Okay, so here we are in Bitwig, and you guessed it, the synthesizer we're talking about is the one and only Minimoog. Now, for the software emulation, we have the Mini V in here from Arturia, and for the hardware side of things, we have the clone from Behringer, the Model D. Now, this is not at all a versus kind of video or a comparison or whatsoever. I think both sounds amazing, and me as a Psytrance producer, I can get pretty much the same results out of both of them. It's only the experience of using them that changes for me. And yeah, I'd like to include both of them in this tutorial, so you actually have no choice. If you have the software, you can do this. If you have the hardware, you can do it too. So yeah, no choice, man. You can do it. So yeah, with that said, let's talk about why this synthesizer is actually this special for me. Now, for sure, there's this subtractive schematic that actually made the way to almost any modern synthesizer we use today. Like, if you think of it, they all follow the same schematic. So it starts with 3 oscillators in here that feeds into a mixer that has a really nice feedback circuit in here. I prefer the one on the hardware, but both of them can deliver a really nice warmth to the sound. And everything feeds into the famous ladder filter by Moog in here and up to the VCA, basically the output circuit. Now, modulation-wise, we're pretty limited. We have 2 envelopes in here, one for the VCA, one for the filter, and both are attack, decay, sustain. Pretty basic envelopes, and they're actually pretty smooth. They're not that snappy, in my opinion. And we have a pretty basic modulation matrix in here. Basically, we have 2 sources, oscillator 3, or noise, and we can actually blend between them, and they can modulate the pitch of the oscillators, the cutoff point of the filter, or both of them at the same time. Now, Behringer, on the other hand, added some really nice goodie and extended this simple modulation matrix in here. So first of all, they've added an LFO that can go up to 100 Hertz, and we can choose from square or triangle shapes for the LFO. And also, now the filters envelope in here, we can use it as a source to modulate the pitch of the oscillators if you would like to, or we can also blend it a little bit with the LFO and create some kind of a weird blend between them. Let's get back to the software in here. Now, Arturia added this really nice switch in here. It's called polyphonic, and basically this turns it into a polyphonic synthesizer. Now, I really like these kind of practices when developers actually takes advantage of these amazing computers that we use today and gives you the possibility to either stay true to the original or actually switch it to a polyphonic synthesizer and get 32 voices of the Moog Model D. And trust me, in a full mix, no one will know the difference if you've used a software or a hardware. So why not taking advantage, of our computers and these emulations and actually get these, get more juices out of these emulations without losing the spirit of it, you know? I hope that makes sense. And keeping it on the subject of taking advantage of these computers that we're using and the fact that we're working with an emulation, you know, keeping it true to the original, but adding some really nice goodies that we have only in those digital synthesizers. Well, Arturia has this advanced tab in here that you can see in a lot of its synthesizers, the soft ones. When you click on it, you will have this extended, basically, modulation and effects section that actually makes the synthesizers way more fun to play with. So, starting off, we have an LFO arpeggiator section in here. The LFO is pretty basic. We have the basic shapes, including sample and hold, sample and glide. It can go up to 50 hertz. That's pretty nice, and it can be MIDI synced. And next we have a motion recorder. Basically what the motion recorder in here is, just like Serum's LFO, for example, you can draw your own crazy shape, and you have up to 4 of these motion recorders basically, and you can use them to modulate 4 different destinations of the synthesizer. And you know, with them you will create these crazy LFOs, and they can modulate whatever you like. And I think this adds a lot to the experience of using these synthesizers, because you know, when you're using a hardware synthesizer, you have this fun side of things when you're like, you know, twisting knobs, etc. And in here, these kind of like LFOs actually adds kind of like a similar experience, if that makes sense. Now, moving on, we have a modulation matrix in here, and it's pretty wild. As you can see, we have 4 destinations and 4 sources. The sources are basically almost everything you can think of. There's the mod wheel, velocity aftertouch, VCF envelope, VCA envelope, trigger, sample and hold 1 and 2. They're like the same in Serum, for example. We just call them over there note and random. No, LFO, VCO 3, VCA out, external in. By the way, I don't know why Bitwig doesn't recognize that the synthesizer has an input. Ableton does, by the way. That's pretty weird. I hope that Bitwig will solve this issue later on. And anyways, the destinations that we have in here are almost everything in the synthesizer. So everything can be modulated the way you like. And yeah, I think this pushes the synthesizer and what it can do to different boundaries that you couldn't have on the original one. And lastly, we have an effect section in here. It has a vocal filter. Basically, it's a format filter that you can modulate the way you like in the modulation matrix. And you can change how the vowels are spreaded in this kind of like a matrix thing. And then you have a chorus and a delay. And I think that's pretty nice, because like if you just want to have a delay on your preset, or you just want to fatten it up like real quickly without the need of like getting another reverb, etc., well, you have everything in here. And a vocal filter, basically a format filter, is actually pretty nice, especially from a Psytrance producer point of view. Like, you just feed it with a saw wave and you got yourself like a weird talking lead, if you know what I mean. So yeah, if you have this emulation, go try that out. You'll get some really nice leads out of it. Now let's hear it in action and see how I use it as a Psytrance producer. So the first thing I like to use this synthesizer for is, believe me or not, FM. It makes the grittiest FMs out there. Check this out. So here we have a really basic saw wave. Pretty cool. So I'll turn off everything from going to the mixer, and I'm going to modulate the frequency of this first oscillator with the third oscillator, because this is basically what we can do with the synthesizer, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is, let's listen only to the third synthesizer for now. I'll leave it on saw, just the way it is, and let's take a tuner. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'll turn off the key tracking of this oscillator in here, okay? And I'm going to tune it to the root note of this track, which is basically D. And I'll set it to D1, so I'll take it 1 octave lower. Perfect little wiggle, that's not a big of a problem. Now let's turn this off. And what I'm going to do in here, I'll turn on the first oscillator again, I'll set it to the maximum, 10 decibels. Oh, 14, sorry. And I'll go to the advanced tab in here, I'll get back to the modulation section, and I'll turn off all of these sources and destinations. So there's nothing going on in here. So what I'll do, I'll set the modulation matrix in here to oscillator 3. So this is our source. The destination will be the pitch of the oscillators in here, so I'll set it to on. So now, when I'll turn the mod wheel, and this works on the original, by the way, we will modulate the first oscillator with oscillator 3. So let's crank that up. Okay, nothing too special. Now let's set the waveform of this first oscillator to square. Okay, we're getting something dirty in here. Let's move up 1 octave. Nice. Let's move another octave. FM, please. This is, wow, this is wild, man. Like every time I'm stunned by the FM the synthesizer is capable of doing. Now, what we can do in here, if I'll add a node grid device in here, you've seen it in my other tutorials, it's my autoplay / rhythmizer clone in here. So we have a random sequencer, and if I'll play, we will get this. This is so greedy. We can actually add a tiny bit of feedback in here. Now, this is why I prefer the one on the hardware clone. It's because we have more headroom before the feedback starts distorting. So check this out. Here we have like a tiny sweet spot in here, and then it starts distorting all the way. Check this out. Yeah, we don't want that. We just want a tiny bit of warmth somewhere in here. Perfect. Yeah, I'll keep the filter open the way it is. And what I'm going to do in here, because we're in the digital world, I'm going to use a really nice filter that I've been using a lot lately. It's the filter M12, which is basically an emulation of the Oberheim Matrix 12 filter made by Arturia again. And what I love about this filter is that, well, you have all of the shapes that were there in the original hardware, and there's this phase LP1P, which sounds so good. Check this out. Pretty wild, right? So if I'll give it a little bit of delay, and I'll unsolo it, so we'll hear it with kick and bass, we'll get these results. Those wild phasey tones. Let's check the bandpass. I'll take the 2 poles one, give it a little bit more resonance. Check this out. Man, this is some extremely wild FM action in here. I really love what you can do with this synthesizer. It's huge. So that's the first main usage of the synthesizer, you know, in my studio anyways. Now, what I really encourage you to do is just take the same patch and start playing with these different waveforms, change the octaves, and see how that affects the sound, because this thing can go really wild when it comes to FM, and you can get some really nice juices out of it. Actually, a lot of the presets from the fragmentation preset packs, the one for Vital and the one for Serum, has wavetables that has been sampled from my Behringer Model D, just FMing all the way, and yeah, getting like crazy tones out of it. So yeah, go check that out. Okay, now let's move on to the second sound. Now I'm going to use the hardware for the second sound just to show you the difference of the experience of, you know, sound designing and how I use it. But both sounds can be made on the hardware and the software. So again, no excuses in here. Okay, so the second sound is a filter FM sound, and we're going to take full advantage of the character of this self-resonating ladder filter in here. But first off, the configuration here. So we have a gate signal coming from the Nitron to the loudness contour, or basically the amp envelope in here. So it's triggering it basically. And here in the modulation input, we have a sample and hold signal coming from the Nitron. And this is one of the really nice added goodies that Behringer included in this clone. Basically, and from the modulation matrix, the noise in here can be the mod source at the same time. So now we can actually blend, between, for example, oscillator 3 and the mod source in here. And actually, this is what we're going to do. So how are we going to do this? First of all, I'm going to open the filter a little bit, and I'm going to crank the resonance all the way up. So now, if I'll send a random sequence from Bitwig, we will get this. Okay, nothing too special. But now, let's set the modulation matrix in here to oscillator 3, right? And oscillator 3 in here doesn't follow any pitch, right? So I'm going to set it to triangle, and I'm going to turn on the modulation on the filter cutoff. And now I'm going to crank the mod depth a little bit. Check this out. Pretty interesting. Let's take it an octave lower. Pretty interesting, right? Now, what I'm going to do, let's set the mod mix in here all the way up to basically noise, or the mod source. And if I'll play a sequence, we'll get this. Basically, the sample and hold from the Nitron. And now, when I'm going to blend between them, check what we will get. Pretty interesting, right? But now let's make it even more interesting, and let's start playing with the oscillator pitch in here. Pretty crazy, right? Now let's add a little bit of delay. I have delay eternity in here, 1/8 dotted. This is like a kind of like a default preset that I'm using right now. It has some filter modulation, 1/8 dotted ping pong, and a tiny bit of bit crushing. So now with the kick and bass, we will get this. I can play with this for hours non-stop. It just, man, it's like you enter the psychedelic realm of one of the, I don't know, most iconic synthesizers out there, and it's just blows my mind. And as I said, these sounds can be made in both the hardware and the software. And yeah, with this is the end of this tutorial. I really hope you've liked it. I really hope you've learned something new, and see you next time.